There are two kinds of power in this world, and most people never learn to tell them apart. One kind announces itself loudly. It moves fast, burns bright, consumes everything in its path, and then disappears. The other kind does not announce itself at all. It does not rush. It does not explain. It does not perform. It simply remains. And in remaining, it dominates everything around it. Most people chase the first kind because it feels exciting. It looks impressive. It creates noise. But noise fades. Speed collapses. Fire dies. The second kind of power is the one that shapes history, disciplines minds, and survives long after excitement turns to dust. When you place a disciplined human presence beside something that has endured centuries, you are not seeing two objects. You are witnessing a confrontation between two timelines. One timeline is breath, muscle, and conscious restraint walking through the chaos of the modern world. The other timeline is silence compressed by time, pressure, and repetition. One exists in seconds and decisions. The other exists in generations and endurance. And between them is a truth most people are afraid to face. Real power does not rush. Real power does not shout. Real power waits, observes, and endures. Modern life worships speed. Everything is measured by how fast it reacts, how quickly it delivers pleasure, how rapidly it produces results. Minds are trained to move like compressed gas, volatile, impatient, explosive. Like CNG, this energy expands instantly, burns fiercely, and vanishes without warning. This is how most people live their inner lives. Fast emotions, fast anger, fast attachment, fast desire, fast collapse. They flare up, react, and burn themselves out. And when the fuel is gone, so is their strength. But disciplined power does not move like gas. It moves like gravity, invisible, silent, unavoidable. Gravity never rushes, yet nothing escapes it. It does not argue, it does not threaten. It simply exists, and everything else adjusts around it. This is the kind of power that terrifies chaotic minds, because you cannot distract it, you cannot exhaust it, you cannot provoke it into losing control. It does not explode, it pulls, slowly, relentlessly, until resistance becomes meaningless. Stone understands this law. Stone does not hurry. Stone does not negotiate with weather. Stone does not complain about time. Stone absorbs pressure year after year until pressure itself becomes irrelevant. Fire can destroy wood in minutes. Wind can scatter dust in seconds, but stone remains. Empires collapse faster than stone erodes. And the terrifying truth is this: the world does not remember what burns brightly. It remembers what refuses to break. People are afraid of silence because silence reveals what noise hides. Noise numbs weakness. Silence exposes it. That is why modern life is saturated with sound, screens, stimulation, and distraction. Silence forces you to confront your lack of structure, your lack of discipline, your lack of control. Silence does not entertain you, it interrogates you. And both the disciplined human presence and the ancient form come from this kind of silence. Not the silence of escape, but the silence of training. The silence that watches, excuses collapse. The silence that does not care how you feel. The silence that demands order. When you stand before disciplined stillness, your distractions die, your justifications sound childish, your constant need to be entertained becomes embarrassing. This is why disciplined people intimidate without speaking. This is why true stillness feels scarier than aggression. Aggression is emotional. Aggression leaks energy. Aggression reveals weakness. Stillness is controlled. Stillness wastes nothing. Stillness does not need to prove itself. And control is always more dangerous than chaos. There is a brutal distinction most people never learned: reaction versus response. Reaction is fast, emotional, uncontrolled. Reaction is the spark that ignites without thinking. Reaction belongs to gas energy. It belongs to nervous systems hijacked by impulse, fear, and validation seeking. Reaction feels powerful for a moment, and then it destroys itself. Response is different. Response waits. Response observes. Response chooses. Response does not rush to speak. It does not rush to act. It measures, calculates, and then moves with precision. A reacting mind burns out early. A responding mind outlives generations. One creates noise. The other creates legacy. This is why calm people dominate rooms without raising their voices. This is why controlled individuals unsettle those who live emotionally. The disciplined presence represents response refined through awareness. The ancient form represents response refined through centuries. One is alive now, the other has outlived countless lives. Together they represent a terrifying message. Discipline multiplies time, chaos shortens it. People often ask why this kind of presence feels intense, uncomfortable, even frightening. It is because you are witnessing discipline without decoration. No performance, no humor, no entertainment, no begging for attention, just alignment. Alignment between thought, action, and restraint. The ancient form does not move, yet it has shaped millions of minds. The disciplined speaker does not shout, yet his words dismantle inner chaos. This is frightening to undisciplined minds because it removes excuses. It exposes avoidance. It shows what is possible when energy is not wasted. A controlled individual is a mirror, and most people do not like what they see when the mirror does not flatter them. A still presence reveals how noisy your thoughts are. A disciplined life reveals how scattered your habits have become. That discomfort is not danger, it is truth. And truth feels violent to a mind addicted to comfort. Endurance is another law revealed here. Gas powers engines briefly. It is useful for speed, not survival. Stone shapes landscapes over time. It does not impress quickly, but it defines reality permanently. One fuels movement, the other becomes foundation. Discipline teaches endurance of the mind, endurance of emotion, endurance of restraint. The ancient form embodies endurance of existence itself. Together they deliver a brutal message. If you do not learn patience, life will grind you down. If you do not build structure, pressure will crush you. The world does not respect what breaks easily. This is why comments flood in with confusion. People are not confused by the message, they are unsettled by what it awakens. Something ancient, something demanding, something unforgiving, something forgotten in a world addicted to comfort and speed. This is not motivation designed to make you feel good for 5 minutes. This is motivation designed to strip illusions, to expose weakness, to demand growth, and growth always feels threatening before it feels empowering. Most people want motivation that soothes them. This kind of message does not soothe, it sharpens. It does not say, you are enough as you are. It says you are capable of more, and your comfort is holding you hostage. That is why it feels heavy. That is why it feels intense. Because it carries responsibility. You do not need to become louder. You do not need to become aggressive. You do not need to chase speed, attention, or dominance. Those are shortcuts for weak systems. You need structure. You need restraint. You need silence that sharpens you instead of numbing you. You need routines that build you when motivation disappears. You need discipline that stays when emotion leaves. Learn from the man who mastered himself while the world demanded distraction. Learn from the form that survived time without moving at all. Becoming slow does not mean becoming weak. Becoming slow means becoming unshakable. Calm enough that insults miss you. Disciplined enough that temptation loses power. Structured enough that chaos cannot enter you. When you stop reacting, the world loses leverage over you. When you stop chasing speed, clarity finds you. When you stop begging for validation, presence emerges. This is not spirituality for comfort. This is discipline for survival. This is the kind of strength that does not collapse under pressure. The kind of strength that does not announce itself. The kind of strength that remains when everything else fails. If something inside you felt shaken, exposed, or unsettled, that is not fear. That is awakening. That is the nervous system realizing it has been living too fast, too scattered, too undisciplined. Awakening is uncomfortable because it demands change, but change is the price of strength. This is daily path to strength, not the path of noise, not the path of speed, but the path of control, silence, and endurance. Stay disciplined, stay silent, stay unbreakable. Most people do not fail because life is cruel. They fail because they are soft where they should be structured, emotional where they should be disciplined, fast where they should be patient. The world does not destroy them, they dissolve themselves, slowly, quietly, through habits that feel harmless but are lethal over time. This is the tragedy of modern strength. It looks powerful, but it cannot last. It is built on stimulation instead of structure, excitement instead of endurance, motivation instead of discipline. And when stimulation disappears, so does the strength. There is a reason ancient forms still command attention while modern noise fades instantly. Time respects only what is built correctly. Anything rushed collapses. Anything emotional leaks energy. Anything undisciplined cannot survive pressure. This is not philosophy. This is physics applied to the mind. Pressure reveals structure, and most people avoid pressure because they know their structure is weak. Fear is misunderstood. Most people think fear is something to eliminate, but fear is not the enemy. Untrained fear is. Fear without discipline turns into panic. Fear without structure turns into avoidance. Fear without awareness turns into self-destruction. But trained fear becomes clarity. It becomes alertness. It becomes presence. Disciplined individuals do not run from fear. They stand still inside it until fear loses its power. That is terrifying to witness because it reveals how much of modern life is built on running away. The ancient form does not move because it does not need to. It has already outlived fear. It has already endured pressure that would break 1,000 impatient minds. The disciplined human presence does not rush because rushing is a confession of insecurity. When you are secure in your structure, you do not need to hurry. When you are aligned, time works for you instead of against you. Modern minds collapse under waiting. Waiting exposes impatience. Waiting exposes lack of control. Waiting exposes addiction to stimulation. That is why silence feels unbearable to most people. Silence removes escape routes. Silence forces you to sit with yourself, and many people cannot sit with themselves for even a few minutes without reaching for distraction. This is not a small weakness. This is a structural failure. Strength is not built when things are easy. Strength is built when you stay when everything inside you wants to leave. When you remain silent while emotions demand expression. When you stay disciplined while motivation disappears. When you choose structure over comfort repeatedly, even when no one is watching. This is how calm becomes dangerous. This is how control becomes intimidating. The world fears controlled individuals because they cannot be manipulated easily. They cannot be rushed. They cannot be baited into reaction. They cannot be exhausted by chaos. And chaos hates what it cannot infect. This is why disciplined people are often misunderstood. They are called cold, distant, intimidating. In reality, they are simply not leaking energy. They are not feeding the emotional marketplace. They are not participating in unnecessary drama, and that threatens systems built on distraction. Look at how fragile modern confidence is. It needs constant validation, likes, praise, approval, agreement. Remove those, and the confidence collapses. That is not confidence. That is dependency disguised as strength. True confidence is quiet. It does not explain itself. It does not defend itself. It does not argue with noise. It stands. And standing is harder than reacting. There is something deeply unsettling about witnessing a presence that does not need to prove anything. It forces comparison. It forces reflection. It forces uncomfortable questions. Why am I always restless? Why do I need constant stimulation? Why does silence make me anxious? Why does discipline feel threatening? These questions are dangerous because they expose the cost of avoidance. Discipline is not punishment. Discipline is protection. It protects your time, your energy, your attention, your future. Without discipline, life makes decisions for you. With discipline, you decide. That is the difference between being carried by the current and shaping the river itself. One leads to exhaustion, the other leads to mastery. Ancient systems understood something modern culture forgot. Freedom is not the absence of rules. Freedom is the presence of internal order. Without order, freedom becomes chaos. Chaos becomes suffering, and suffering becomes normalized. Most people today are not free. They are overwhelmed. They are overstimulated, exhausted, and emotionally reactive, yet they call it freedom. True freedom is the ability to remain calm when chaos demands reaction. When pressure arrives, and it always does, it does not ask if you are ready. It simply arrives. Pressure reveals whether you trained or avoided, whether you built structure or chased comfort, whether you mastered yourself or outsourced control to circumstances. Pressure does not lie. It exposes reality immediately. This is why ancient endurance feels frightening. It reminds you that comfort is temporary, that speed is fragile, that excitement fades, and that only structure remains. When everything else collapses, what remains is not talent, not intelligence, not motivation. What remains is discipline. People think discipline limits life. In reality, lack of discipline limits life. Indiscipline traps you in cycles you cannot escape. Emotional cycles, financial cycles, relationship cycles, mental cycles. Discipline breaks cycles. It creates direction. It creates stability. It creates identity rooted in action, not emotion. The disciplined individual does not need to announce strength. Strength becomes obvious through consistency, through restraint, through presence. When someone does not react to provocation, it unsettles those who rely on provocation. When someone remains calm under pressure, it exposes those who collapse under less. Calm becomes a weapon without ever being used. There is a reason the disciplined path feels lonely. Most people do not want to walk it. It demands too much honesty, too much responsibility, too much effort without immediate reward. But loneliness is not weakness. It is often the price of alignment. When you stop living for noise, noise stops following you. Time behaves differently around disciplined people. For the undisciplined, time is always slipping away. For the disciplined, time becomes a tool, a resource, something shaped through routine and intention. This is why ancient endurance feels eternal. It does not rush, it does not chase, it remains. Most people fear becoming strict with themselves because they confuse strictness with cruelty. But self-discipline is not self-hatred. It is self-respect. It is choosing long-term strength over short-term relief. It is choosing order over impulse. It is choosing alignment over indulgence. When you master yourself, the world loses power over you. Opinions lose weight, temptations lose urgency, fear loses control. This is not arrogance, this is stability. And stability is rare in a world addicted to movement. The contrast between chaos and control is not subtle. Chaos leaks, control contains. Chaos demands attention. Control commands it without asking. Chaos reacts. Control waits. Chaos burns fast. Control endures. One is impressive for moments. The other defines eras. Most people want results without transformation. They want strength without discomfort, peace without discipline, clarity without restraint. But that equation never balances. You cannot skip the process and expect permanence. Anything skipped must be paid for later, with interest. There is a quiet violence in discipline, not violence toward others, but violence toward weakness, toward excuses, toward avoidance, toward self-deception. Discipline does not negotiate with laziness. It does not debate with fear. It does not entertain distractions. It acts, repeatedly, calmly, relentlessly. This is why disciplined presence feels ancient. It connects to something older than trends, older than algorithms, older than validation. It connects to survival, to endurance, to the instinct that understands life is not meant to be easy, it is meant to be mastered. If this message feels heavy, it is because it carries weight. Lightweight motivation evaporates quickly. Heavy truth stays. Heavy truth changes behavior. Heavy truth demands responsibility, and responsibility is the doorway to strength. You do not need to become extreme. You need to become consistent. You do not need to isolate yourself. You need to regulate yourself. You do not need to fight the world. You need to stop fighting yourself. Silence is not emptiness. Silence is preparation. Stillness is not weakness. Stillness is readiness. Discipline is not limitation. Discipline is leverage. When you stop leaking energy, you gain presence. When you stop reacting, you gain control. When you stop chasing speed, you gain depth. When you stop needing approval, you gain authority. Authority does not come from position, it comes from self-mastery. And self-mastery is always intimidating to those who avoid themselves. This is not a message for everyone. It is for those who feel tired of chaos, tired of reacting, tired of being controlled by impulses they did not choose. It is for those who sense that something ancient, disciplined, and unshakable still exists beneath the noise. Strength is not loud, strength does not hurry, strength does not explain itself, strength remains. This is daily path to strength, not comfort, not distraction, not speed, structure, silence, endurance. Stay disciplined, stay calm, stay unbreakable.